I'm not allowed to talk about why a certain person may have given a total fucking soup sandwich of a press event today at lunch. I will acknowledge that it was in fact a soup sandwich of a press event. I will acknowledge that nothing he said was sensical or rational or inspiring or comforting in any way, knowing that he is in fact in the position that he is in, legitimate or not. I vote not. I'm not going to talk about that part. I'm not going to talk about what might be going on with him, because I don't want to get in trouble again. So let's talk about the person that he was before where he is now as a being. We're not going to talk about what's wrong with him medically. We're just going to talk about what's wrong with him morally and functionally. And we're going to talk about it in the past. We're going to talk about his past. Because the man has always been stupid. Even at his healthiest, his halest, his best, he is not an intelligent human being. He is conniving. He is opportunistic. He is very quick to seize on opportunities to aggrandize himself and to try to make profit. And most importantly, I think for his core personality, he's mostly quick at seizing on opportunities to degrade and harm other people. If he can't win in a situation, as long as he makes sure that someone else loses and suffers while losing, he considers that still a big W for him. Let's talk about where he was back in, I believe it was the 90s to the early aughts. Do you know that he was estimated over $500 million, actually somewhere between, I think, like 800 million and $1.8 billion in debt? Yeah, that's your great businessman there. He doesn't understand business. He doesn't understand deals. He understands the con. He understands image, because remember, that's what mostly he sold, was the image of Trump. He had this fake persona, John Barron, which I still find it very odd that he named his youngest son Barron, same spelling, Barron, as John Barron, the persona that he would assume so that he could call into newspapers and gossip columns to let people know that Bachelor Donald Trump will be at such and such event with such and such model, or, you know, he's looking to date, or he's going to be here and he's a successful millionaire, and all of these, you know, very positive, glowing adjectives that he would use about himself, as if he were this other person, this John Barron guy. He would call and say, there's, you know, the world's greatest businessman. He's such a catch, and he's got so much money, and he's so successful, and he has so many businesses, just, you know, doesn't even talk to poor people, and blah, blah, blah. Right? So he was good at taking those opportunities, those exploitative, predatory opportunities. I'm still just talking about his professional life here, because yeah, like I said, I don't want to get in trouble again. So he is at a point where he was in the casino business, and he around $1 billion, maybe a little over, in debt, absolutely bankrupt. He'd bankrupt several businesses. He is known for his terrible practices when he does run a business, where he kept running afoul of both the law and contractors that he would refuse to pay, and then they'd have to take him to court, and he would just keep countersuing and dragging it on until eventually they themselves would go bankrupt, because he would refuse to pay. It would make it so expensive for them to try to get paid by him that he would have that win anyway, even if it caused him to go into more debt and to have to hire lawyers who he was also fairly notorious for not paying. So he's in massive amounts of debt. But American banks were done. They were not going to bail him out. His debt was bad. But for some reason, he was able to convince Deutsche Bank to go ahead and back up some of his loans and to give him some lines of credit. But according to several people, including his own son, a lot of the money came from Russian banks in the 90s and aughts, when he was really struggling, when the man couldn't make money at a casino. That's pretty compromising, right? So why would Russians want to invest so heavily in this morally questionable, not highly intelligent, really good at marketing himself person with access to so many people in the elite circles of power and privilege, and compromise themselves because of their personal failings and flaws and foibles? I guess rich people get around each other. They just get really comfortable being freaky and awful, letting each other know about it. because I don't know, maybe it's some sort of weird status thing. I can barely pay my bills, so I can't afford to be that gross. So he's in heavy debt. He's flashy. He's in New York. He's in the midst of this sort of social scene, which is where a lot of politics happen, because everybody who has a lot of money knows each other. They know each other's dirty secrets. They know what each other likes. And these are the people who make donations to politicians so that they can shape the world the way they want it to be for their own comfort and profit, and to exclude as many other people as they can so that they themselves have access to more, so they can be the kings of the world. So these are the kind of people that he was hanging out with, that he desperately wanted approval from, that he wanted ins with, to hang out with and be seen with and be known by. He wanted his name out there. But he is deeply, deeply compromised and compromisable because of his debt, because of his proclivities. His greed made him somebody that you could get to through money, and his bad decisions, knowing that he would continue to make bad decisions. But being able to be bailed out would pretty much make him beholden. Now, why would somebody in Russia want to bail somebody out like that? Why would they want to have him in their pocket? And I'm sure he wasn't the only one. I mean, and we also know people in our 51st state over, you know where it is, also want to have a lot of politicians and donor class people and elite people in those circles. They want to have them in their pocket as well. Do you know that at the fall of the Soviet Union, there was this former KGB agent that eventually became the leader of Russia? You know, Vlad. He hates the United States very much. And one of his biggest dreams was always that our country would break up into little pieces the same way that the Soviet Union had done. That was kind of what he saw as a fitting thing to happen to the United States. I'm not saying that you need to put those two ideas together, that a lot of Russian bank money went into bailing out this supremely compromisable, not very intelligent, morally deficient human being who had power and access but didn't have a lot of money or ability to make good business decisions, but really wanted to build a worldwide real estate empire based on name recognition that would be associated with Trump and Trump properties and Trump branding, because really that's where he was making money later, was just by selling the idea of Trump. He was actually just mostly the licensing his own name. And when he got on The Apprentice, again, high access to the narrative, to eyeballs and hearts and minds of people to continue building his reputation, but also to continue implanting himself into our social fabric because he was now on TV. But when he got onto The Apprentice, he did it because he was desperately out of money. He was fucking broke again. And that show saved him. And he was able to continue licensing and using the Trump name and the status symbol of it that he had created, even from the John Barron days till that show, to continue to use that to make money now. He'd been interested in politics, and I think we've learned and seen how the oligarch, donor, parasite class grooms people and sets them up and puts them in place and figures out what they like and how to move them and how to shape their narrative and their message and get them into position for years before they actually run them. It seems like it's almost more obvious with the right wing, but it does happen on the left side as well. And also, don't forget, the man was a Democrat his whole life until Barack Obama. His racism, knowing that the Republican side was owning the narrative in media spaces, in news channels, and in money. Predators are probably going to tend to be on this ultra-authoritarian side. That just makes sense because they build wealth by exploiting people. And so you're going to have a really hard time finding a moral person who has $1 billion and can buy a politician, right? Kind of saw that was the direction that our country was drifting as more and more money got into politics. And so he had to become a Republican now. He's not actually a Republican. He's really just all about himself and his family and his wealth, and he's not a Republican. I wish we had a Republican Party, but they're all gone now. They're just MAGA now. So he had to be put into that position. And there's a lot of really interesting things to talk about in the way that things like meme culture and 4chan and all of these online spaces were able to get him over that finish line, to make him the meme president. And then, of course, we find out that people like Jeff and Ghislaine were heavily involved in those very online spaces. That's very strange, considering their ties to foreign governments. That's weird, right? So we have a deeply compromised, very greedy, amoral person who's been positioned over years through his own machinations first, and then with the assistance of the right kind of people who have the right kind of money and invitation to the right kind of parties and hold the right kind of compromise, or compromat if you prefer, to position him to get into the political arena. And one of those people wants to destroy our country completely. And here we are. The Department of Education is under the control of a person who's supposed to be dismantling it, who's known mostly for being the wife of Vince McMahon and also being a corrupting force and children to be preyed upon in her organization, and a big donor. She's in charge of the Department of Education. We have RFK Jr., who thinks people should drink whole milk after working out in jeans. Vaccines are bad. Sniffing coke off of toilet seats is fine, and swimming in garbage with your grandchildren is also A+ for your health. Destroying the Department of Health and Human Services, along with Dr. Oz, our ability to take care of ourselves. Dismantling FEMA so that we can't recover from things. He's trying to get states to infight. He's thinking about how much he hates blue states, and then sending in ICE into predominantly blue states to harass, harm, kidnap people, to commit crimes and acts of terrorism, to get people to be afraid. He's working on disenfranchising as many voters as humanly possible, so that access to civic life and access to any sort of political power is restricted as much as possible. And as I talked about before, their understanding of the economy in that MAGA side is not about making sure that there is prosperity and comfort and human dignity and access to all of the necessities and basics of life, but rather their idea of the economy is deciding who can and cannot participate and who can and cannot have any benefits to it or access. They want it to be as restricted as possible. They don't want women to participate in the economy except as extensions of their husband. They should be staying home popping out babies for the labor force and also be completely under the control of their husbands financially. They don't get to vote because there's going to be a one family vote that's run by the man. So they don't want half of the population, actually slightly more than half of the population, to participate in the economy or in political life. And then they don't want minorities to be able to do it because, they're not really Americans. So that's much more than half of the population. So in reality, they want maybe 25% of the population to have any sort of participation in the realms where all the decisions are made. And that's the money and the politics, the vote. So your pocketbook and your vote. They want to restrict who has access and who can do that. So what happens next? Do we find a way to unify again? Because the left wing and the right wing are not coming together. You've got the people who are buying into all of this fuckery and bullshit, who have believed the narrative that they have been fed, who have voted for cruelty. And then you have the other side who want to fix things, but our power has been stolen over and over and over again, at least politically. We're not going to unite. States are fighting amongst themselves and against the federal government in some places, and states that aren't fighting the federal government are fighting their citizens. Our institutions are being dismantled. It's working. So how do we fight against it? How do we get an actual Democratic Party or an actual opposition party or revolutionary party that's not beholden to the same oligarchs that are controlling the people on the right? How do we get them to stop throwing people under the bus? Right? Certain human rights issues are considered divisive, and so they have to move further and further to the right to appeal to this group of voters who will never swing leftish, who will never come back our way, but will demand that the people that they put into power look and act and think the way that they want their politicians on the right to do as well. How do we create an opposition party? Because the leadership of the Democratic Party is failing us. And none of our third parties have had access to the kind of money and power that are now so prevalent and so dominant in politics that they're basically shut out. How do we do that? How do we do that with the system that is in place to protect itself? How do we change laws when our people who make the laws, write the laws, sign the laws, vote on the laws are the very people that are beholden to the lawless, who want this country authoritarian and who want our people powerless? Our politicians are only afraid of not getting reelected. They're only afraid of not getting donor money. They're not afraid of the voters voting them out. We're in a system right now where we're presented with candidates. We don't bubble them up naturally and organically from amongst us. For, of, and by is gone. We have to choose. And how we are led to choose, the narrative that frames how we choose, is all too often controlled by the kind of people who have enough money not just to buy access to politicians and to groom and mold them towards political office, but also to the media spaces, the news and the networks and the radio programs and the podcaster platforms and the social media platforms that also control and direct the narrative of people on the ground. And those are the only people that we ever actually get an opportunity to vote for. I don't know, but I hate it. Anyway, I love you. We'll talk soon.